Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's D-Zone Fireside Chat using AI agents for DevOps in 2026 with DuploCloud and MetricStream. I'm Max Crampton Thomas, your host for the session, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two experts leading the charge on AI and DevOps. Venkit Thiruvengandam, founder and CEO of DuploCloud, and Valinayagam Nala Perumal, Vice President of Strategic Technology and Cloud Operations at MetricStream. AI has completely transformed how we build and ship software. But when it comes to DevOps, many teams are stuck in the weeds, juggling manual workflows, complex IAC scripts, and an endless backlog of tickets. Today, we're exploring how agentic AI can change that by accelerating incident resolution, automating compliance, and giving engineers more time to focus on innovation. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to turn it over to you both.
Thanks, Max. Thanks for having me. I'm Venkat. I'm the founder and CEO for DuploCloud. Um, I started my career at Microsoft Research that went on to become Azure. I helped write the compute stack and one of the first engineers in the networking team. So have a lot of cloud infrastructure and automation background, and really excited about this new agentic era that we are moving into, coming off of the cloud era.
Uh, Thanks, Mac. Thanks for having me. My name is Valinayagam. It's long, so I go by BN. I head the strategic technology group and cloud operations at MetricStream. Uh, I've started my career as a developer. Uh, have seen the .com boom days. Have seen technology evolve over the last 30 plus years. Now I think we are at a very interesting point in technology where AI and the agentic AI pieces are going to really change the game. So really looking forward to how we can tap that into our DevOps process.
So yeah, so maybe what we can do is that we can start by discussing about the ground reality and how AI fundamentally impacts DevOps. So traditionally, the way DevOps is sort of like done is that engineering teams, or like the users, they would come in and they would basically have a set of requirements that could be like, hey, this is my application, I need a SQL database, I need maybe a Redis instance, and maybe I need some third party software. I would go and give that requirements over to the application, to the DevOps teams, and the DevOps team would sort of like understand it. They would convert it into scripts, like infrastructure as a code scripts and so on, and then sort of like go and deploy it. And when more often than not, engineering teams would have an evolving requirement, especially with microservices. There are so many moving pieces. They would go back. The DevOps teams would again make changes to the pipelines and so on, and then sort of like get that stuff done. Over the period of time, as the infrastructure becomes bigger, the teams become bigger. There are like more number of moving pieces. There is like a constant process in which the DevOps teams constantly have to catch up and making updates and so on. And then once they are overwhelmed, they hire more people, they hire more tools to do that, and that's, generally speaking, is the conventional way of doing things before AI. I think what's happening with AI is that you can now what's happening with AI is that now, instead of like the DevOps teams reacting to specific requirements, they can actually go and build, so to speak, an AI engineer, wherein the engineering teams could directly go and ask, "Hey, I need this to be done," and then that AI DevOps can fundamentally tap into the LLM and ask the LLM, and the LLM can basically go and do dynamic research from the internet and the documentation and everything else that it has learned, and then call a set of tools to get the stuff done. So that's, generally speaking, like the main difference is that you move from writing, so to speak, point in time scripts reacting to specific use cases, to building more like AI agents, providing it the right set of tools and relying on the intelligence of the LLM, which is like your new engineer, almost like a human. Right? We call them bots and so on. So that's, I think, one way how things are sort of like changing. But I'll sort of like hand it over to VN for a moment and who can talk a little bit about how they are thinking of leveraging AI in the metric stream use case.
Uh, so that's a good point. Yes, surely the provisioning or the creation of the infrastructure as code to provision instances, your CI/CD pipelines, all that is a DevOps engineer's job. And with AI agents, I think we can surely automate it, simplify it. Probably, I know it's DevOps, so it's actually Dev and Ops combined, but we can also probably open it up to a larger pool of developers rather than just the DevOps team. So that's one part of the equation. But for us, at least in Metric Team, what we are looking at more is the operational side. The provisioning side is more, it is continuous, but it's more, what do I say, focused during certain points in time, like when you're releasing a new feature, new capability, etc. But the operational side is more continuous. It's almost 24/7, especially when you're operating SaaS solutions. And that's where, we are seeing how we can tap into the AI agents to help us, because right now, informations are in silos. You have it in your logs, your ticketing systems, it's spread all over. So we are not able to bring it together, or you have to have human intervention to bring it together. So that's where we think that AI agents can help, because, you know, they can constantly monitor, they can constantly infer, and really convert the ops world from a reactive scenario to a proactive state of managing issues. And also maybe I'm wishing for it, but maybe even kind of start predicting potential failures and then mitigate it before it occurs, rather than just fix problems once they occur.
Definitely. And in fact, like there is the space, which is like a new category of software that is sort of like coming up, which we call it as AI SRE. And they are largely focused on the troubleshooting use cases, troubleshooting operations. And even then, there are like two kinds of categories. One, they call it as, reactive use cases, so to speak, wherein, people can come and say, hey, I need something to be done. My application is slow, or I need to save cost in my cluster, can you help me optimize the system? And then it sort of like goes and helps you do that. And then there is the what they call it as a task as the execution mode, so wherein that the AI is constantly working and proactively going and collecting all the data, like how things are working, if there is a problem, and then sort of like solving that. But definitely, I think what we have seen is that the amount of impact that AI is can potentially make. I mean, from the initial results, it seems to be like exponentially better. In fact, to that effect, what I'll just show you, just to put some reality to the words, I'll share my screen. So, at least in our business, a lot of stuff gets done in Slack, and other people use Teams and so on. So this is a use case, like typically, once in a while, what you want to do is that you want to be able to go and check the utilization of your cluster so that you can save costs, and then, go through the process. Like in the AI world, you can actually do it like this. You can basically say, I need to optimize my cluster so I can save costs. Can you help me? And then what happens is you send the message, and then you have tagged AI, and then the AI responds back. We basically go and create a ticket and give some more context. We basically, talk about, okay, which environment you're talking about, okay, what specialized agent we want it to look at. We want to give it some permissions, and then we can sort of like go and create a ticket. And now, in the traditional world, you can basically go and create the same ticket. We are lucky if an engineer can go and look at it in maybe like half a day or one day, and then they will go and do an analysis, generate Excel sheets, they will basically eyeball it, and then they'll sort of like go and talk to other people and then work on it, and it like a several day process. Whereas in this particular case, the ticket basically immediately gets picked up by AI, and then and then it basically says, okay, these are all the things that I want to check. It basically asks approval for these commands, and then I can just go and click submit. And then what it will do is that it'll basically do an analysis, and it'll just generate the report, and it'll say these are my initial findings, that you can go from there. I think the interesting part of this is that this particular agent was not hard coded, or we did not specifically put a workflow for cost optimization. In fact, the entire size of this agentic code base is one Python file with maybe just 600 lines of code. what it is really doing is that it is actually leveraging the power of the LLM to sort of like see to basically go and achieve this particular task. Now, for example, we did this, so it actually already responded to us, and you see that it took like maybe just a minute, and it says it found the critical. It basically says this is the report. These are the critical issues that are found. It basically says node utilization is so low, and it gives you a table. It gives you a recommended action, and it basically tells you what to do. In fact, like what we can also do is that we can basically ask, can you go and fix it for us? Can you fix these? And then it'll actually go and give me commands that it is want to runs to go and fix it and so on. So this is the power. Like this same task about a year or so back would take us maybe about like 3 to 4 days, and now I'm able to achieve this level of results in just a few minutes. And this, I think, and the more important part is that I didn't even have to write code specifically for this use case. I built an agent, and I can basically go and ask any arbitrary questions related in that particular domain. And as long as the LLMs know about it, and which nowadays seem to be getting more and more powerful, they can basically sort of get stuff done. So this is sort of like an example I wanted to sort of put, some reality towards about how we do things. And maybe I can hand it over to VN to talk about some real life use cases that they are doing it in metric stream with application of AI in DevOps.
So, that's a pretty interesting uh, approach to solving problems or getting your job done. And especially, it's impressive that you can do it in such a short time. Um, what we are trying similar things, but when there is an issue or when we have a problem, we are trying to get our agents to go look at the past issues created. Try to see similarities, try to see patterns that the agent could possibly latch onto. Because for a lot of times, maybe there are some solutions. So now the agent is not having to come up with the solution on its own, but it could also tap into past solutions, which means the quality of the solution it's going to provide now is going to be better. And with time, probably you get a lot more efficient solution for any problem that you encounter, right? That's the approach we are trying to see how we can make the agents work. Not only use the LLMs, but also augment it with past data of tickets and resolutions and what have you. So if we are trying to bring that together to ensure we get a much more robust and efficient and effective agent out there. And I believe with time, we can probably get these agents to do most of the job. And here, at least, you are prompting. My wish is not even have to prompt, have the agent automatically figure out, oh, okay, this resource is not being utilized. So how do I cut the cost? Can I do something? So that's the next step, which is where I think we will get to. But surely I'm getting ahead of myself on a timeline scale to get there.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the common things that come in is that in AI world, like we started with Chat GPT, which really went viral and took the world by a storm. So going forward, a common question that people are thinking, and especially enterprises are thinking, is that how much do I build myself, and what is it that I expect actually from vendors and so on. So like I said, right, I mean, this particular agent is like 600 lines of code and one Python file. So what does it mean? Does it mean that, okay, I take an LLM and I can sort of like build everything on my own? So I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. So I think enterprises are able to build a lot more than they used to build. But at the same time, I think the type of software companies and ISVs are really going to change. I think we are going to see a lot more and more of what we call as vertical AI orchestration. So what does it mean? See, LLM is like, you can think of it, it's like a book, or it's almost like, a knowledge base. You ask a question, it'll give you an answer. It's English in and English out. It cannot take an action. Like, for example, you can say that, okay, deploy something for me. It can say, this is the command to do the deployment, but it cannot actually go and do the deployment. That command is going to assume that you're going to have some credentials. It is going to assume that, it has the endpoints that the command needs to run against and so forth. So that's orchestration. orchestration. So has to be a middle layer wherein when the user says, hey, can you tell me what's going on with the cluster? So then that middle layer needs to interpret who is this user, what permissions do they have, which cluster they are talking about, get all these things together, send it to an LLM. And then you have to give what is known as tools, for example. And these tools are the ones which take the recommendation from the LLM and actually action it. Now, these tools could be, let us say, a Kubernetes management system or an observability systems and so on. So I think though that level of orchestration of like putting things together in a particular context, and then being able to provide the tools which can take LLM recommendations and action against a non-AI peripherals like Kubernetes or AWS APIs and so on. Those all largely, I think, would probably come from the vendors. Whereas, what businesses can do is that they basically go and write the actual agent by putting together various different capabilities and so on. So I think that's how we fundamentally are seeing the landscape sort of like changing. So it's giving more and more power to the individual enterprises, while the ISVs play a more of an orchestration kind of a role. And obviously, and this is very different than SaaS. Like in case of SaaS, there is a vendor, they would basically give you a platform. It's very opinionated. It has a set of forms and you have to live by that. Whereas in this particular case, you actually have a lot more capabilities and strengths to do that. Maybe I can turn it over to VN and maybe just ask about like, what are the high level areas? I mean, I know you talked about operations. So are you also leveraging AI in the non-DevOps world, VN, in metric stream? And how are you looking at that? Are you also building an agentic platform for your core product? And how are you looking about it overall from in a broader scheme of things?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we are leveraging AI in our SDLC in the development cycle itself, starting all the way from requirements down to testing and release, right? So the entire gamut of it. But apart from that, we are also bringing in AI capabilities into our products itself. Um, so first is, simple things or relatively easier things. And then we want to actually provide a framework where our end users can create their own agents if need be, right? So while we may not be able to create agents for meeting all different scenarios or use cases for customers, we want to provide the capability where our end users of our product can actually build simple agents that can either simplify the task or make it more efficient or automate it, whatever it is that they are trying to achieve. Uh, so you touched upon an interesting point. The build versus buy, I think that's a constant struggle. The dynamics involved. So yes, we also go through the build buy decision, but you're right. The world is changing and you cannot build everything yourself. So you have to buy. But then, you know, build buy always has a cost aspect to it, timeline aspect to it. And then whether you end up with a vendor lock-in or whether you have some constraints so you have to look at those aspects and then make a build buy decision. But you're right, orchestration is a necessity, especially when you have multiple agents trying to work collaboratively or work together to achieve an outcome, which is not very different from how we manage teams, right? We have multiple people, you parse work out, give it to them, ensure they are all doing it, you coordinate it, get the output. Just that right now we don't need people to do it. You're just building the systems and the orchestration layer should be able to do it. The different agents can go do specific tasks, etc. But all this is great, but I do have concerns on the security side because security is also one of the biggest concerns across the globe today for everybody. And I know I'm repeating a very cliched phrase, with with great power comes greater responsibility. And I think that is so true in today's world, especially with the AI agents, because you've got to give power. You've got to give the access to the agents to go execute something. But then, one misconfiguration, one error, it can also create havoc in the systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like training a young intern, like, how much how much access do you give them?
Exactly.
You don't 100% know their capabilities. They may make a mistake. While, having more engineers is always great. They can get a lot of stuff done. But then at the same time, if you rely on them too much and they make a mistake, then, the effort to clean up that mistake sometimes might overshadow the gains that we've made in the past. So yeah, I think VN, you absolutely put it right. It's managing agents is like managing people, right? Completely. So I think that is, I think, a great conclusion for this particular conversations. Effectively, AI is like building talent, building people, but it comes with the same set of challenges as managing people, trusting them, security, what access do you give them, and how do you keep oversight, how do you do their performance review, and so forth. So definitely, I think that's all very true. So I think now we can maybe take some questions and then sort of like go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for a great conversation. And yes, we actually do have some excellent questions that have come in from the audience. So if you don't mind, I just want to dive right in. So the first question we have here is, what is your ROI framework to measure success?
Yeah. I think we can both take our questions. So we are a vendor in this AI space, and obviously VN is the consumer. So I can measure. See, fundamentally, I think what we do in our business is that we claim that you can optimize some substantial labor and not have a lot of other tools to achieve the DevOps outcomes that you want, DevOps automation outcomes that you want to. So the general ROI framework that we do in the very simplest case is that the dollars that you spend, for example, in our project, right, should be substantially lesser than the dollars that you would have to spend otherwise, right? And that otherwise could essentially mean, doing it in-house, hiring more people, buying more tools, and so on. So it has to come down. Number one is to be dollar that's spent in a particular time, right? As a reference, like let's say if the project is a 6-month project or a 1-year project or a 2-year project and so on. That's one. Second is that obviously set very clear goals for what would you like to achieve. Like for example, maybe what you want to achieve is that, okay, I want to move my current stack from X to Y, for example, right? Maybe it's because of X number of reasons, and you should be able to do that. And then there are like more deeper ROIs in that. Okay, I'm able to produce more business results. Like I'm able to get more onboard more number of customers. I'm able to get more upsells done, and so on. So those are like for us as vendors, that probably is a second level. We can get to a point where a project is defined, and okay, there is a dollar value for that particular project, and they're like very clear technical deliverables for that project, and that's how we would measure ROI from our thing. But I'll hand it over to VN because he will have a more business perspective because he's a business user of AI.
Right. For us, the ROI is more outcome based, right? I mean, you can't really, at least in operational and in delivering service to customers, you can't just quantify everything directly. There are always indirect costs also that you have to factor in or take into account when you look at the ROI. So, um, you know, prevention is better than cure. So every incident that you avoid is, benefit to the organization. It is an part of the ROI. But I think primarily we are looking at reduction of, the MTTR, mean time to recovery. How our SLAs, have we improved and meeting our SLAs continuously? What's the growth there? How quickly are we identifying or addressing issues, or probably, as I said, proactively identifying and mitigating issues even before they occur? How do we keep, you know, drifts in configuration, other things from not getting proliferated across the system? And really, even better is how quickly can, even if we were to make a mistake, how quickly can that mistake be identified and rectified? All these come into the ultimate ROI, but all these ROI eventually translates to, happier customers, more ACV or more growth in terms of revenues, lesser day-to-day operational costs. So it'll boil down to these three aspects.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate both your perspectives. I think it lends itself well to really our next question here. So, what are some of your skepticisms around AI at the moment?
Ian, you want to take that first?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think I briefly touched upon it. My skepticism primarily is, you know, one, cost of doing this, because you use these AIs, you use LLMs charge you on a token base. Um, and if you have a bug in your agent, or if you have something which just goes off and repetitively does the same thing, your meter on the token usage runs so fast that your cost can go up, and you may not even realize that your cost went up after you know um, uh, after quite some time, and that can be problematic. Part one. Part two, mistakes can then get propagated very fast, right? And then what in a manual world was a smaller problem, or where the blast radius is much smaller, where you can control it, constrain the problem. Now you have a much larger blast radius, just because the AI agent went and just spread it all over the place, and now you've got to undo all this and control the damage, right? Those are my biggest skepticism. Having said that, also the third part, I think I believe we can, but how well can we get agents to coordinate their tasks? Because at least where we stand today, there are what we call the hallucination problems with the agent. And when you have multiple agents coordinating, the hallucination may be small in each agent, but when you start to put it together, they kind of start to amplify. So a small problem in each agent can combine together and amplify into a much bigger problem. So those would be my skepticisms at this point. The first two, I don't know how fast we can solve, especially the cost part, but the agent hallucination, I think we will get there in the future. Don't know how long.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, like I share almost all the skepticism that we had talked about, especially the way we are at least talking about the hallucination. I can give a very practical example. So today we have our AI framework that works in with two user interfaces. One is Slack user interface, like I showed you in the demo, and one is the browser interface. There, it basically directly talks to our system. We call the LLM. LLM gives us a response, and then we sort of like deal with it. Then there is like another thing that we are doing is that we are trying to create the IDE experience, so that people, because this is especially useful because in the infrastructure world people do infrastructure as a code. So we want to be able to have a system where you can write infrastructure as a code and at the same deploy and troubleshoot it. And in order to do that, we are basically starting with an open source software which does that. So over there, you now rely on the LLM to basically orchestrate various different tools. Now, for example, let's say I ask, okay, can you create me a Helm chart for MongoDB? So that goes to an LLM and it is going to create the files. And now I've relied and I've told that LLM that when you need to do deployment, call me. When you need to generate files, don't call me. Now I rely on that to call me, right? If it does not call me, then the experience sort of like breaks down. So that's where like sometimes I think it sort of I think it calls me really well every single time, but when it sends me the token, it messes up. It just takes the characters here and there out of it and so on, and then you have to sort of like deal with it and so on. And this is something that I don't control, right? So now we sort of like put wrappers around it to say, okay, let's take the token part out of the LLM, let us make it more deterministic and so on. So I think we are trying to solve those particular problems. I think in summary, I would basically put it this way: getting to demo is like super duper easy. Getting to like 80 to 90% is manageable, but getting that last 10% in AI, which is actually the one which will make a meaningful impact in production use case, is like really, really hard. Right. So that is, I think, where a lot of people are having skepticism. In fact, I mean, there is actually an MIT study which is saying that, I mean, it's almost a very pessimistic view. They said 95% of AI projects are failing, right? And much of all the investments, including our stock market and GDP, is driven by AI, right? So there is this big thing about like, okay, on one hand, we are seeing a reality where people are saying they're not able to get the ROI. And on the other hand, there is tremendous amount of investment and people are talking about trillions and billions, like they say, trillion is the new billion. So all that generates off definitely a lot of skepticism. And then, like, VN said he has seen the .com. I hope that maybe I think there might be a correction and we'll get to the real use case. Like .com definitely gave birth to SaaS, but .com was not about portals. It was not about the .coms, right, that everybody was building. And I have a skepticism that right now we are building the .com equivalents with AI. We need to get to real SaaS, right? And that I think will come after a little bit of correction.
Absolutely. Well, we talked about kind of your personal, both of your personal skepticisms and some solutions around that too. But I'd also be curious, what are some of the challenges you have in upskilling your existing team and kind of dealing with their apprehension around AI?
Yeah, I think maybe VN, you can take that and then I'll talk about my team, how we are dealing with it.
Sure. With AI, there is a new learning for everybody, and this is common with technology. As I said, I've seen technology change, and one of the example I tell my team members is when I started my working, Java was not even a language that existed, right? And then Java came about, and everybody had to learn. And we know the proliferation of Java and building so many of the applications, SaaS world, etc. And now, Java is kind of mature, but not growing as fast as some of the other newer technologies as well. So technology is going to constantly evolve, which means that people have to have the ability to learn. I think the biggest concern with most of the teams is AI going to change my job? And what I tell them is right from the days of industrial evolution, every time there were step up, people always thought it's going to impact their jobs, but it just that the number of jobs increased. The nature of jobs changed, but the numbers only kept growing. So I keep telling them that's what you need to worry about. The nature of job may change, but the number of jobs I don't believe is going to reduce. Short-term blips, etc. But I'm just looking at a slightly longer, continuous stuff. Right? Um, s- and the other is resistance to change. You have to overcome resistance to change. And in technology field, resistance to change is just anathema, if you will ask me. You just cannot afford to have it. You just have to get over it.
Yeah, I think he's right. At a large extent, I would basically say this is sort of a change which I think to a large extent has to be driven top down, right? Because I mean, we all have some resistance to change. I'll call it inertia, right? I mean, things are working, life is going on, right? Not everybody wants to constantly change and get to the new place. But when there is something so fundamental and such a big shift as AI, I think it is our responsibility as leaders at the top to be able to, for the lack of a better term, enlighten the teams that we have, and then push them towards that, and in a right balanced way, and sort of go from there.
Absolutely. No, I think in today's day and age, we can only afford to be so resistant to change. Remaining flexible and adaptable is the key. But we are all out of time for questions today. But if we didn't get to yours, someone from DuploCloud team will follow up after the event. Before we close, though, Venkat, where can people go to learn more about DuploCloud and explore AI-driven DevOps solutions?
DuploCloud.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And here's one key takeaway I want to leave everyone with. AI agents are redefining DevOps by turning manual, ticket heavy workflows into intelligent, automated systems that let engineers focus on innovation instead of maintenance. We hope you found today's discussion valuable and insightful. If you'd like more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to Venkat and the team at DuploCloud. Once again, thanks for joining DuploCloud and D-Zone today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.